Okay, I'm going to get started. There's still quite a number of people joining here, but we have the recording available afterwards. So let's get started. So my name is Don Bowman. My company is Agilicus, and today I'm going to talk about VPN alternatives generically for anything associated with industrial control systems. But really, I'm going to be using some examples from the water and wastewater industry, which is where I've got the most experience. And today we're going to talk about really, this was sparked by a set of emergency directives from CISA on VPN usage. There was one for the Ivanti platform, which CISA themselves got hacked on. There was one for the Fortinet and one for the Cisco platform. And I'm not here to say that the VPN is a bad solution. It's the good solution for what it's good at. What instead I'm here to talk about is alternatives to that for people that it's not a good solution for, and how we can do single sign-on and multi-factor and all those things in a very, very seamless fashion for people that are very lightly associated with the organization. So those people might be temps and contractors, they might be manufacturers, they could be anything of that nature. So the agenda today, we're going to talk about the remote needs of critical infrastructure. There's a lot. They're growing. They're growing due to technology. So we're seeing more and more technology that we acquire requires some sort of interconnect to work. The fog, the low-lying cloud. You've got devices that are recording data into some sort of big data system for predictive analytics. You've got manufacturers that are seeking to make subscription services out of things that were, formerly, capital purchases. We've seen that in the agriculture with John Deere. Your tractor is now a computer, and you need to have it connected, or they won't sell it to you. We're seeing that in other areas. One of the ones I've run into is a chiller by Siemens. It's got to be connected, otherwise they won't sell it to you. And that's driving more and more complexity into networks that were really based around exceptionally trusting environments. The whole outside bad, inside good, it's never more like that than when you get into an industrial plant. You've got equipment that's in there for 20, 25 years. You've got PDUs that are just very, very simple, telnet in, serial out. And the other side of the serial port, who knows what that is? It could be something that's turning on and off a big, scary machine. It could be something that's just measuring the temperature, who knows? But there's lots of them on the network, and more people that are coming in remotely to support the network are creating risk for those things on the side. So we're going to talk about some of those risks, the good, the bad, the ugly, and then we're going to talk about a specific alternative using zero trust. And I've got a very short demonstration today to show what that might look like for that hypothetical company that is supporting you. So first, we're going to do a poll. And there's no wrong answers. It's semi-anonymous. You can put in what you think is appropriate, but CISA dropped these 3 emergency VPN directives relatively close together. And they basically said, in a nutshell, delete that thing from your life and get rid of it within 10 seconds. Paraphrasing. The Ivanti one was particularly tough because you couldn't just upgrade it to get rid of the fault. You had to, wipe it entirely. They were really worried about a rootkit coming in and staying past the upgrades. And, you've got the interconnectedness of all things. You've got your network and your partners have the client and, et cetera. So some people said, what emergency directives? Others, they jump into action, spit their coffee out, start pulling plugs. Other people are like, let's go back to the way it was in our grandparents' day. Just get in your car, drive to the office, and none of this remote bullshit. Others are like, hey, nobody's using that here, so let's go shred all the docs about this and hope nobody finds out. Some just don't talk about it. Hey, this thing called shared accounts, the first rule of Fight Club is there's no Fight Club. Other people, they did one patch and they sort of went up behind them, but I'm hopeful that the majority of you saw this as an opportunity to sign up for this webinar. And today I'm going to try to tease out some of those things. So we'll just publish that poll. So moving on, the needs. Industrial control systems, I'm really fascinated by these. They have a really long lifespan. You think about standard IT equipment, Your laptop is considered pretty old at 2.5 years old. At 3 years, it's off your capital table. And you get into the industrial control system side and you find that there's a panel, an HMI, that has a 25-year life ahead of it. And it's effectively a Windows 98 or Windows XP touchscreen. It's really no different than what the laptop used to be, but people have expected to buy it and capitalize it, amortize it over a much longer life. As a consequence, the idea of patch early, patch off, and get rid of the old stuff, it's not really a thing. And you see that everywhere. It's easy to talk about, one specific item. Oh, this PLC is my problem. We just put a little network segment around it. But then you realize it's in your HVAC, it's in your building management systems, facilities, smart locks. And you've got a lot of constituents that are each got their little fingers in that pie. There's not one SCADA historian. There's a set of things. The cameras record here and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's really not often a simple, easy to use identity system on site. It's often all application-based passwords and these things. So as a consequence, they don't get changed and you don't know who has access and the risk and the controls. There's a legitimate need for lots of people to use these things, and there's a legitimate reason to trust those folks. But when you start talking about it's a person, no, it's a company. That Siemens chiller I mentioned earlier, are you going to create a shared account for Siemens? It's 200,000 people work at that company. Somebody got walked out in bad terms while we were on this call. You don't really want the idea that there's a password to your VPN which has access to everything in the hands of Siemens. It might be okay to be down to the level of one individual, but not everybody. So that scope, risk to controls is very, very complex to manage here. Much more so than on the IT side, which tends to be just my staff and maybe a few people that have signed an employment agreement as contractors with me, 1099 contractors. The VPN, it's really a long Ethernet cable. It's not sugarcoat it. It really is a type of moving trust from A to B over, something in the middle. And it's really a good solution for people that need very broad access to things. So either site-to-site VPNs, these two buildings are logically one, or IT staff, look, I'm going to be upgrading every PC on this network. But it's really, really best at all or nothing. I have access to everything, I have access to nothing. And that's kind of a pain because you really want to think about defense in depth, you really want to think about blast radius, instead of switch our mindsets from the perimeter is infinitely strong, nothing will ever get in, to it's already in the perimeter and let's just slow it down and see where it's going. The VPN's not a good thing here. And it's really evolved from dial-up concepts, dialing into the network and being attached to it. And it predates the concept of SaaS and cloud, where there really isn't a single location of the network either. So, what sense does it make to VPN into everything? And it really was also conceived around the singular company idea. I work for my company, I access my building. And as soon as you start to talk about, this system integrator supports me and, this company does my alarm management, they monitor my HMI for me and page me, there's how many people are going to need that? How am I going to do first factor, let alone second factor on it? So the VPN, what it's good at, it just works, right? It's really like being there. It's having a cable plugged in as if you were in the office. There's no additional steps. Once it's up, it's up. You can leave it up for months. The transport's encrypted, so that way you know that nobody's sniffing around on the wire as it leaves your house. And it's a very trustworthy technology. It's got a lot of great chops when it comes to encryption, AES 256, cha-cha, poly, this stuff. And also, to be fair, no one's ever got fired for deploying a VPN. It's not like you're swimming against the tide here, to paraphrase IBM of the 70s and 80s. The bad? Well, come back to those people that support you. You run some critical infrastructure, a water treatment plant. You've got a bunch of Rockwell PLCs on site, and you've got a system integrator that you work with that updates the firmware on those PLCs periodically to adjust things in your environment. And I can tell you that integrator, the last thing they want is to install your VPN, because then they'd have to do it for all of their clients. And can you imagine having one laptop with 30 different VPNs installed? Oh, I need 3 different versions of Cisco AnyConnect. It doesn't work. So what's their alternative? Have one laptop per customer, per person that works for them? Doesn't work either. What they likely are doing is they're creating some sort of internal jump box, and it's a VM infrastructure, and there's a VM that is permanently attached to your infrastructure, and then their team can just use it. And it sounds like a good idea until you start thinking about it, and now that's a really big risk for you. Another thing that's bad about the VPN is people don't realize, but VPNs have two main strategies. The first is called split horizon. It tries to figure out which traffic is meant for your building and which isn't. So some goes to the public internet and some goes to your building through the VPN. The downside to that is, A, it's not as secure. It means that information can be leaked out. Your machine, you're not doing document leakage protection, but your DNS is going external, and that PC in the home, it could end up acting as a router or bridge in. So people say, let's not run split horizon. Let's just run full default route. The problem there is when you connect to your company network, your internet goes down. So now all of your internet traffic goes into your company and back out again. You do that big call with everybody, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, or whatever, and suddenly they're complaining the video quality is bad because the VPN's up. It's because it's all going into the company and out. The company's upstream becomes your downstream and vice versa. People start complaining they can't print at home because they're non-split horizon. People complain about devices. I want to just pull over to the side of the road, open my tablet, and do the thing, but your VPN client's not available. Sometimes the subnets overlap. Those people that support you, they're using the same RFC 1918 private IP space as you, and you've made a choice, they've made the same choice, and now they got to change their IP addresses in order to connect to you because it's routed. It really leads down the bad rabbit hole of shared accounts with no multi-factor because it's difficult for people to conceive. So the ugly side, we've seen a bunch of these, but one of the ones that really caught people's attention was the Colonial Pipeline attack a couple of years ago. One VPN, one contractor, and suddenly the gasoline supply of a G8 nation is at risk. Wars start for this. This is the equivalent of an archduke getting shot in 1914. This is a big deal. You think about in the 70s when I was a kid and people were lined up for gas, things got pretty ugly. And if it turned out that that was caused on purpose by someone, it could get really ugly. The VPN connects your network to their network. Their risk becomes your risk. Their ransomware becomes your ransomware. These are things you don't want. Those emergency directives, they're trying to highlight that the VPN itself has weaknesses and it needs to be controlled how it goes in your network. So really, that's why we think that VPN alternatives are appropriate for certain types of users and use cases. The person that needs access to one HMI doesn't need a VPN to your network. Let's talk about how that works. So don't panic from what I just said. Do go and get rid of those VPNs like CISA said, but also do remember the rules of Fight Club and don't tell anybody. The connectivity nirvana, if you put yourself in the moccasins of your workers, and I say workers, they're not necessarily employees. They are the companies that support you, the manufacturers, the, this, that, the other thing. What do they want? They don't really want to know about your entire network. All they want to know is the resources they need. I need to use HMI 3 and HMI 5. I need read-only access to those things. I need to be able to see the tags from that PLC. I need to be able to back up that Veeam system there, but nothing else. And I want to do it from where I am. I might be in a cafe, I might be at the side of the road tethered on my 5G modem, I might be at home, I might be at my office. I don't really want to get involved. VPNs are bad in this environment. A lot of network address translation and hotel networks break them. You don't want that. They want to do it on the device of their choice. So they don't want to hear, I'm going to work with partner A and partner A requires this and it doesn't work with my device, and they throw a hissy fit. And they want to do it with their own single sign-on credentials. And I say their own. Every person has a native way they sign in to stuff. If you create a second one for them, it creates friction and it creates security problems. So your partners have their own Microsoft accounts, they have their own Google Workplace accounts, they have their own Okta, they have their own Apple ID or what have you. They've got a strong password system on that. What is in your best interest is to be able to say user at company, user at partner are able to do this thing. And that federated identity, that unified authentication, it really simplifies the problem for those users. But also it simplifies another problem. Going back to my Siemens example, that person that was walked out the door for fraud, Siemens took them out of their identity provider like that. They can no longer sign in anything. It's not like the shared password problem where at the end of the month you might get a notification. Any user, any application, any device, any network. So this is a good segue into Zero Trust, and then I'm going to show a little demonstration of what the end user experience might look like here. Zero Trust has had a lot of press. You know, you see it being pushed by all sides. It's considered a best practice. And like all best practices, it could be big, it can be small, it can be complicated, it can be simple, and everybody has a different opinion. I'm here to share mine. Yet another opinion on the top of the pile. Zero Trust is three things. The first is the who problem. Who are you? You need to know the person or the system, the actor. And for that, we talk about authentication and identity. The second problem is the what problem. What are they allowed to do? Authorization. So you want this to be as fine-grained as possible. So the who problem comes from world-class identity providers like Okta and Google and Microsoft. The what problem is something you own. You know, that person is allowed read-only access to that HMI between the hours of 2 and 3. That person is able to, etc. And it needs to be that very fine-grained authorization, precise authorization. That's really important. The VPN is the opposite. The VPN is you're into everything, now be good. And then the last part is access, which is how. How do I get you there? So if you know who someone is and you control what they're allowed to do, and then you facilitate them getting to the how, you have Zero Trust. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to do your entire network. It's not like it's a Boolean. The network is or isn't Zero Trust. You can bring it online one bit at a time. You know, you could say, we're just going to deal with this part of the critical infrastructure, just the HMI that is used by the third party doing the alarm management for us, nothing else. And that way you can control your risk. You can make it read-only or allow them just to act the alarms. So the high-level user view that we propose, so at Agilicus, our product's called NEX, and as you might have guessed, our product helps facilitate this solution that I'm talking about. We try to make everything web-based. Now, you can't always. Some things are stubborn, so your Rockwell Studio doesn't suddenly become a web-based application tomorrow. But for the most part, things are. So we bring remote desktop into the browser, SSH into the browser, web apps into the browser, a share into the browser, etc. And by doing that, you allow those third parties to not have any software to install. You know, they can pull over the side of the road, open their tablet, boom, VNC, boom, HMI, click, click, done, work is completed, faster, better, cheaper, mean time to repair. They sign in with their existing company login. So you work for company A, you have a partner with company B. Company B has 2 people today. They sign in as Joe or Jane at company B. There's no lack of security from that. That doesn't reduce your security at all because you still own the authorization. That company is attesting that person is who they say they are. You are attesting to what they're allowed to do. It's your authorization, and you can force a second factor on that. And in fact, we would recommend it. Our system will implement that. So that way you can say, you know, yeah, you can absolutely use that HMI. I just need to know who you are with a second factor that I trust. And that way I know you haven't shared it. And this is ideal for narrow task-based workers. Again, this is not trying to replace the IT team's VPN for upgrading all of the PCs in the plant. It is designed for the person that is doing a narrow task. They're supporting a specific system. They're supporting specific things. It's really great for HMI, PLC programming, PLC tags, generic things that support SCADA like the historian and upgrading it and backing it up, facilities, BMS, etc. There's no layer 3 routes, so there's no routing tables here, so it doesn't break your video conferencing like we talked about earlier. You don't have to worry about overlapping IPs. It's a proxy-based model, so it's an identity-aware proxy. And what happens is every resource behaves as if it was on the public internet. Users just click on it in their browser, and they use it. They interact with it after signing in as if they were there. From their standpoint, the system is invisible, which is what you want. No new usernames, no new passwords, great security, very precise authorization, a really good audit trail available to all parties, trust plus verify. So I'm going to show a really brief demo right now. I confess I recorded it last night just so that it wouldn't go awry today, but it is live and I'll talk over it or live in the sense I did it last night, and I'll talk over it while we go. So think about you're an end user and your sign-in screen has as many identity providers as you need. So we use Google Workspace here, but you might have seen login with plant Active Directory. So the plant might have a native Active Directory. You can see the multi-factor coming up. Here I'm using with something called passkey, and it pushes to my phone. But the user might have also signed in with Okta or their partner login there. And you see they're able to immediately just click on this HMI, and you can see in the URL bar in the browser, it's just a public URL. There's no VPN, there's no SSL tunnel, there's none of those things brought up. We can log into VT SCADA here, just doing a quick demo login, and boom, that one also works if I have access to it. If I didn't have access, it wouldn't even show up for me. I could ask for access. You could do read-only. Here we're going to launch VNC in the browser. You can see this is a remote desktop experience. Those eyes are kind of freaky, just watching you move around stuff. But this is just moving windows, anything you want there. But also it can integrate with desktop applications. So here I'm going to launch VNC as a native application, but this could be Rockwell Studio. This could be the Schneider programming suite. It could be any of those things. And you're going to see, I'm just going to drag it on in a second here because it opened off window. This is a native application. This is non-browser based. This works with any Windows applications that way. They're just slightly more complicated. And that was my brief demo. So I will just excise the demo. So it's really hyper optimized for semi-technical users that are really good in their own problem domain, but not really that interested in the IT problem domain of routing and networks and VPNs and logins. They just want to get their task done. So why does this reduce risk? So, I've talked a little bit about why I think the VPN is an imperfect solution for that task-based worker. It really leads rise to this shared password problem, shared accounts. There's no reason to do a shared account in this system. Each person signs in with their native single sign-on credentials from their own company's identity provider. So you don't have to worry about their HR team telling you who's been fired. It's gone. That single sign-on, the user says this is easier, your team says it's more secure, everybody wins. That overbroad access is gone. Think about the blast radius. The VPN is attaching my network to yours, and then I get a little aggressive with something called Nmap, or I plug in a skunky USB drive I found in the parking lot, and it goes ham on your network. You don't want that. The blast radius is I was given access to the HMI via VNC, via read-only, and if my machine is totally compromised, there's a gun to my head, that's all anybody can get. Nothing more. And there's an audit trail to show what it was. That audit trail is perfect. It's not like the VPN where you just see VPN came up yesterday at 2 p.m. Every transaction is there, and it's cryptographically proven, it's immutable. You can enforce multi-factor authentication. So a lot of your service providers will use multi-factor authentication themselves in their own identity systems, but why take the risk? When it was just as easy as that, my phone chirped and I clicked, I looked at it with my face, some magic camera with IR and face and yada, yada, yada. The risk goes down so much for that, and it really didn't take any time out of the day. I could have used a USB-based device, I could have used a code-based generator, others, but you get the idea. Removing the VPN means that only the resource and its network protocol are accessible, not the machine it's on. Back to my SCADA historian, it might be running Windows 2008. It might be running Microsoft SQL Server 2008. It might have 1,000 CVEs that are priority 9 or higher, but because I only have access to the historian software, I don't have access to the full machine, let alone the stuff that's around it. It reduces that risk. We're talking here about risk reduction, defense in depth, rather than one layer that's perfectly strong, many layers that are each individually decently strong that slow down the attacker and give you time. And there's no software to install, no shared software, no shared licenses, so it makes it a lot simpler for folks to do. The implementation needs. So this is actually very simple. A lot of our customers, the deployment is an hour. It's a couple of hours. It's not a project that is a Gantt chart and a project manager, etc. So the first is that unified authentication. There's no config here. This is pre-integrated to Microsoft, Google, Okta, etc. If you have your own identity system, like you have your own on-premise Active Directory, that's also something, it's just a click box to turn on. Some of the plants we work with, they don't have any authentication source locally. They use application-based authentication. That can also work. But the key is that each user gets their user@org just to function. And you just don't, there's not a lot of work here. A lot of places have done most of the work already, particularly if they've moved to Office 365 or Google Workplace. That precise authorization, there can be a bit of work to set up the firewall rules. You start by just on off, and you go a little bit level down. Okay, VNC, read only, read write. SSH is obviously always on. A share, you might be able to read files or read versus write files. That simple share, this is something a lot of people find really amazing. Is one of my customers, they have they make complex mechanical systems, and they have an air gap inside an air gap. And on the very most inner part of it, they have something that's recording a bunch of stuff about how a certain type of mechanical device is operating, specifications for how rivets were put in and so on. And they wanted to get that off of there as if it was a share. And everybody's like, no, you're gonna have to drive there, USB key in this and move it over there, etc. But because of our connector technology, we were able to nest it, and they're able to see that a share on that machine outside the plant, even though it's through a dual air gap system. And again, there's nothing else you can do with that. The blast radius is that share, and it's read only. And you've got the ability to do that down to a per person and per resource basis. And that really seamless audit, you don't really care about the audit until the day somebody says something bad happened. And suddenly you're intensely interested in the history of who did what when. And you really are going to love having an audit that says this user, this thing at this time from this IP and this device. And there's no clients to install. It works behind any complex network. It works behind network address translation like Starlink or cellular, because it's an outbound only connection that's parked there. So my call to arms, as we finish up here, call to action. The first is, I'd like to believe that you already understand, or that I've convinced you, that there are underserved individuals that could be more efficient, and more efficient means more stuff done per dollar in your organization by being able to more quickly get to something remotely. As things get smarter, more specialized, you're going to be forced there. Security is going to get more and more important. The more of those smart things that are out there, the more they're going to try to kill you. Lateral traversal becomes very costly. So that VPN, being able to get into one thing and then sideways, Colonial Pipeline was lateral traversal. They got in, they moved sideways. They got into something they weren't supposed to, and then they did something bad to it. I'd like to believe I've convinced you that the VPN is not an appropriate solution for everything. So again, I'm not trying to say VPNs are the end of the universe as we know it, but instead I'm saying they are not an appropriate solution for that system integrator that supports that one PLC. You don't really want them VPN to your network. They don't want to install your software. And I hope I've convinced you that single sign-on and multi-factor should be for everyone. It should be for me and for thee, not just for me. And it should be if you need me to do something in your plant, I should sign in as don@agilicus.com, which is how you can reach me afterwards. And you can decide whether I'm allowed to do something or not. That's what Zero Trust is about. Rather than creating a Don_contractor at my company and getting me to sign your employment agreement on NDA and so on, which nobody really enjoys. So after this, I would love for you to reach out to me. You're welcome to put some questions in the chat if you like. But email, call, calendar, smoke signal me, don@agilicus.com. And challenge me. You got this right. What about this? I didn't really understand that. Can we talk more on this? That's really what I'd like to do, is I'd like to engage with you. So with that, we are kind of wrapped up. If there's any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Otherwise, we will send you a follow-up email afterwards with a link to the recording in case one of my fantastic jokes is something you want to use somewhere else. So we have a question here. What does the configuration look like? So there's two ways I can interpret the question. So from configuring the system, there's a simple web-based interface. I didn't show it in the demo here. But the first thing you do is you say, what identity providers am I willing to trust? Microsoft, Google, Apple, Yahoo, LinkedIn. The second thing you do, you can do some simple theming on your login page with your logo and stuff as well. Second thing you do is you quote unquote create users. And by creating a user, you link them. So in our system, you type in the email address from that external system, and then we don't have a password. So when the user signs in, they will claim that account. The second part of the configuration is there's a connector. The connector will install somewhere on the site, make an outbound connection to us, and it goes to sleep. It has no further config. And then the third part is creating those resources. So you're going to say new VNC, what's the internal coordinates, apply, and then you assign permissions. The user group called system integrators has access to the devices in the HMI group, and boom, they just use it. So that's the general configuration there. There is an API, there's an SDK, and there is a web-based interface. The majority of our customers use the web-based interface. Some of them that are more deeply integrated use the API or the SDK. All of those are available on our website. Typically, configuration, like I've got a lot of experience with water plants. We've got more than 100 water plants running this system today. And typically, the number of users is in the order of 10 to 30. The number of resources that are externally exposed is on the order of 10 to 20. And the configuration, the initial config of that is on the order of 4 hours to set it up and test it. I see another couple of questions coming in, so the question is, how is the system priced? So you can see our pricing on our website. If you scroll to the very bottom right, there's a link called pricing, but we're priced on a per user and per connector basis. So the connector roughly is location. Sometimes there's more than one per location because of network segments, and users are obviously users. Another question is about hardware options. So the connector is the only piece of software of ours that you run. The rest is all cloud or browser based, and it runs on a wide variety of things. So Windows servers, Linux servers, OpenWRT, Nano, Raspberry Pi, MikroTik, pfSense, Ubiquiti, Cisco IOX router. Any of those. The connector has very modest footprint requirements. So our customers, when they install the connector, they either install one per site or one per resource, depending on how tightly they're trying to segment. When they install one per resource, an example, one of my customers has a Windows XP based SCADA device. I know this is shocking. No one on the call has that, of course. And for reasons they can't get rid of it, which again, I'm sure they're entirely unique on. And they wanted to make sure that literally nothing could get to that, but it still needs to participate in their universe. So what they did is they installed our connector on it. It makes that outbound connection on HTTPS 443 to a known location, and they block everything else to it. Just literally everything else is blocked. So even if you're on the local network, you can't get to it. If you walk up to a ransomware on a USB key and plug it in, it can't activate because it can't get out to the network. If you walk up and you plug a laptop beside it and you scan it, you don't see it. So we see a lot of people that are doing that. Okay, seeing no more questions come in. Next steps. Oh, I do see one more question come in. I'll talk while that goes. So next steps, you're going to see a email from us with the recording and some coordinates to get a hold of me, but you're welcome to do it here, don@agilicus.com. You can come into our website, you can click on the book a calendar meeting, etc. And we're going to try to get a hold of you. We'd love to enter in a dialogue. If there's anything specific that you'd like to talk about, just feel free to reach out, and I'll just wait for this last question here. The awkward part of webinars is that you can all see me, but I can't see you. So, do you provide continuous monitoring and risk assessments? So in terms of, there's two ways I can interpret that. Our system continuously monitors itself, and those statistics are available to you. Monitoring in terms of how people are using it, there is an audit trail, and you can use that as you will. You can either send that via webhooks to an external SIM, or you could use it via our API and periodically pull it out into something like Google BigQuery, or you could use it in our web interface directly and look down into it. In terms of risk assessments, we don't typically do risk assessments of our customers' networks. There's other partners that are much better suited than that. We have continuous risk assessments done of our system, including we participate in the CISA cyber hygiene program, and we get a report from them every week. Okay, there's a couple more questions coming in. Feel free to stick around and see the questions. The other type of, under the monitoring while you're typing a question, part of our system is also a geo-IP firewall. So typically you would block IPs that aren't in certain geographies, but also you'd be able to monitor the things that you're blocking there, I suppose. Does your system scan end users' computers for, say, a virus or malware prior to let it connect to our system? The short answer is that's on my roadmap. So that's called posture checking. So there's a couple of ideas we have for it, integrating to an existing one, making sure that it meets certain criteria. We don't think that certainly I think that's a good idea. I don't think that it's necessarily all that important because, for us, we only expose the one network protocol, not everything. So my VNC example, you'd have to be able to get the access token from the browser session and then apply it to get to that VNC. So just because I'm connected to your system doesn't mean I'm connected to anything other than that one resource. And that one resource, it's guaranteed that it's the user because of how they've signed in. So some other process running on that machine won't be able to get there. That's the advantage of it not being VPN based. There's no layer 3 routing. So your malware that comes up and does a network scan, it won't find anything because we're not on the same network at all. That being said, if you had malware which infected the browser and it intercepted keystrokes and was able to get that access token, then we'd fall back to the next level, the blast radius of what that user has permission on and what they have a current access token for. But in terms of the posture check, there's a couple of items we have on our roadmap there around checking the machine meets certain criteria. It's a certain level of patch, certain this, certain that. And it's something that we're looking at how to implement. It's difficult because we're kind of browser based and it's kind of sandboxed off. So we got some ideas. Okay, I see another question coming in. If we sold this to a customer, would we set up connectors under our account or is each individual? So the short answer is you can do either. We have partners that use each model. And the building supports it and the administration supports it. So we are what's called nested multi-tenant. So you can create an account in us, which we call an organization. And underneath that, you can create multiple other organizations. The organizations have two primary properties. They have delegated management, so you can have different administrators in each. But secondly, if you choose, they can also be invoiced differently. So in some cases, for example, we have one partner that has approximately 50 systems through us or 50 customers through us, and they manage them. So they act like an MSP. They have one organization and it's flat. They just gate their customers on and off to the individual things. But we have other partners that act a little bit more like a VAR, where they help set it up and they help manage it, but then the customer also manages it, and that second model's appropriate for them. So either works. Okay, I think that's it for the questions. You feel free to reach out to me afterwards, set up something on my calendar, don@agilicus.com, or come to our website. You can see my calendar link there directly. Myself or someone else from our team will take care of it. And look for that email afterwards where we try to get a hold of you and just let me know what it takes for us to do some business together. I want to help you and get you to help me. And I think there's something beautiful we could do together. Thanks very much, everybody, and I hope you enjoyed my Zero Trust VPN alternative for critical infrastructure. This is Don Bowman at Agilicus, signing off. Cheers.